you can't get an education from somebody on YouTube. You can learn some things, but you can't get experience from somebody else's experience. I mean, I've seen people give reviews on products that I've owned, and they said, "Oh, it's great, it's wonderful, it's everything else, and this is how you would use it." I was like, "That's not my experience, and that's not how I would use it."
Yeah.
Not that I'm, no better than them, but there's no barrier to entry for someone to give you advice on how to light an interview.
Welcome to The Practical Filmmaker, an educational podcast brought to you by the Filmmaker Institute and Sunscreen Film Festival, where industry professionals talk nuts and bolts and the steps they took to find their success today. On today's show, we chat with Director of Photography and Steadicam Op Bryan Fowler, who tells us the ins and outs of shooting commercials and music videos. Find the full transcripts and more at thepracticalfilmmaker.com. I'm your host, Tanya Musgrave, and today we're talking to Tennessee-based DP Bryan Fowler, whose work can be seen in commercials and television ranging from Fairwood on Crackle to Delta, Exxon, and Microsoft. He also does Steadicam work that can be seen in music videos from artists such as Halsey, Keith Urban, and Neo. Welcome to the show.
I'm so welcomed. Thank you.
I feel so welcomed.
I was like, wow, those are cool things.
I'm pretty legit.
Well, that's not what I meant, but thanks for having me on the show. What's a pod? What'd you call it?
Podcast.
Yeah,
if you go back to the early days, we go way back. I was a senior in film school, and at that particular time, you were a colorist, and you did the color for our senior thesis film. So, like, from colors to DP, I mean, how about even before that? How did you get here?
I graduated from the same place that you graduated from, Southern Adventist University. I graduated before the turn of the century. So I went straight into working for a corporation. Had a few years where I left the company, and then I came back to work. It was basically a production company. And at that production company, I started just as an editor. Then I began to write things for that production company, and then I'd shoot them with the team. We had a small team, and we'd hire people as well for big jobs. And then I often would edit them. So since I was doing the editing, I also was learning color correction. And it was way before the days of Resolve. I was using software that used to be called Final Touch that ended up being adopted into Color by Apple, if you remember that. So I left to be a freelance Steadicam operator at that time. And one of my clients said, "Would you like to DP this commercial?" And I was like, "What?" I asked a friend of mine, David George, who you probably know.
Yeah, we actually had him as a guest on this show as well.
I had hired David as my director of photography when I was directing. And so I called him and said, "Hey, I don't know what to do." And they gave me a few tips. That's a very unfair question. Like, you shoot a video? So he gave me some advice, and it went well. That client liked me, and we did a lot more stuff over the years, like stuff like with Sears and Subaru commercials, and I can't even remember all of them. But that's how I got started doing DP work, and that was about 2008 when I left the corporate life.
Mm-hmm. So you're Tennessee based. You split your time in between, I'm guessing, just like predominantly Nashville, Atlanta, Knoxville, Asheville, I don't know.
Over the years, it's been fairly consistent. Here in Chattanooga, I'm about 3 hours from 5 or 6 different major cities. Nashville, Birmingham, you could throw Huntsville in there, Atlanta, Knoxville, Lexington, and Louisville are a little bit further, but I do work there as well.
Wow.
Asheville, North Carolina, and even Greenville, South Carolina, it's about 4 hours. Dang. So that sounds awesome, but you're also not the guy in all of those towns. You're the guy that comes into all of those towns. So that's what I found myself doing for years, was traveling. And at that time, there was not very much production here in Chattanooga to speak of. There was production, but they all had internal people that were kind of doing everything. So I didn't work in town hardly at all. So it was travel. Like, I just got back from Los Angeles a couple of days ago, working on a job there. We've done stuff more recently, Vermont. I went up there to work with a client. Schenectady, New York, Boston, Chicago, Colorado, Portland. That sounds super impressive, but I mean, it's basically just it's the path of least resistance, right? Like, I know this guy, he can fly on an airplane. Let's bring him over here.
Yeah, for some reason, I thought that was going to go a different way. I thought you were going to say like, oh, but now they're all in Chattanooga.
No, no. Those jobs that call me to travel a lot are not the big giant name jobs. Certainly
Really?
there are some of those that are like, hey, we should do that. But it's kind of the maybe more established clients that already know me. They know how I work. They know what I do and the gear that I have. And so it's if the budget's there for a flight and a hotel and car, then like I said, path of least resistance sounded demeaning, but it's not. It's like, this is a known quantity. We're going to have this guy go do it. I guess a bigger client would also do that as well, probably with more ease than the smaller ones.
Yeah, but I think at the very least, to the people who you've been able to build a relationship with, you know, like they would be at that kind of place where they would be more apt to, I guess, sacrifice part of their budget, you know, to like make sure that their person gets to them.
Could be, yeah.
Rather than just like somebody local. Just like, all right,
right.
Somebody, you know, any old buddy.
And I think that comes with a little bit of experience with the producer, because if someone says, oh yeah, you know, if they're building a budget for a client and they just think, even if it's not, you know, way across country, but just somebody that's like 4 hours away and it's going to be a long drive for them before or after they have to get hotels, a newer producer might think it's not worth it. We're just going to find a local guy. That might be fine. There's always local people, but a more experienced one might be able to say from the onset, hey, we need to build in travel and hotels and paying for the travel days from the beginning, knowing that they're going to do that so that they can ensure for their client what's going to happen. You
mentioned a new producer. What advice would you give a new producer who is looking into hiring you?
So that's a good question, because that can be from a freelancer point of view, that can be a tricky thing. That if it's a brand new producer that's first calling me, I got to figure out, like, are these people used to hiring their friends from a film school, or are they used to hiring like a 30-person crew? So I have to figure that out. I used to try to trick people into telling me what they usually are used to doing. I just say now, like, hey, what kind of crews are you used to working with? Because if they say, oh, yeah, we do a big crew and it's like 4 people, I know what that means. I mean, that means 4 is a lot for them, when 4 is kind of like the bare minimum for me. So, and that's not like, oh, I'm so fancy. That just means I've done it enough to know that, I mean, production is all, it's about being creative. I'm getting to the answer here. It's about being creative, and it's about mitigating risk for your client. The rates that we ask for as a director of photography, as a director, all down the line, it's a lot of money for some clients to spend. And so we want to be good stewards of that money for them. So if a new producer comes to me and they're like, hey, Bryan, we've got a show, or we've got a job coming up, what I love to hear from them is an understanding that they will need to provide me, if they're asking me for myself and then also for gear, whether it's a camera package or camera and lighting, which I have both of those. I like for them to already understand that they need to provide me a certificate of insurance for that, which covers that gear for the time of the shoot. That's something that's often missed with newer companies. Oh, it's your gear. It's insured, right? That's not the point. That company needs, and that's a little different from how other industries work. But for film, I need a certificate of insurance. Understanding that there is a rate for labor and then a rate for the equipment that you bring. That's another key thing. And some people, line item everything. If you were to say, hey, Bryan, what camera would you suggest us using? A lot of it comes down to budget. I like it when a producer says, this is all we have. I know there's always like, oh, are they tricking me? Am I supposed to then, how's this negotiating thing working? But if someone comes to me and says, this is kind of all we have for camera, then I'm able to say like, well, that will get you this camera, but no wireless video. So you'll have to like watch over here, or 2 cameras, full wireless video, and a video village set up. So having a producer that understands that things are variable is good. Travel is another thing. Like at the end of the day, we're on a 10-hour day, but you've got a 3-hour drive home. And they said, do you want us to get you a hotel or we can pay you overtime for that drive home? I don't know if she'd worked out like which is cheaper.
Yeah.
But that was a great thing to ask instead of just assuming, oh, he's off the clock, he's going to drive home. It's a long day and then a long drive. It might not be safe. So that's something that is nice to hear when a new producer says, oh, I understand the time commitment to this. If someone's coming into the film industry and they are just getting started, they don't work quite as much as someone who's been doing it a long time, the small things may seem insignificant. But for someone who works 120 days a year, all those small things can add up, whether that's like an extra few hours on the drive home or a weird lunch schedule. If you've got a full week of weird lunch schedules, it's weird. If it's just one day, it's like, whatever, I'll muscle through. So yeah, there are producers I know that are totally on my side. Not that there's sides, but I've had one that has said in the past, hey, you forgot to put overtime in your thing. You were here an hour later than what we were expecting. And I was like, thanks, man. I was just going to, gloss over that, but yeah, okay. And it made me more eager to help him out in the future.
Yeah.
Because I felt like he had my back on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are just a few things that I can think of.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the COI, that was something that was definitely interesting to come across when I was producing. I was just like, oh yeah, this is a thing on sets. It's good to know. And
it can be like it can be expensive, and if somebody has worked out their budget, and then all of a sudden they're starting to rent. I mean, if you go to a camera rental house, they're going to ask for that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden there's this added expense, and people are like, "What? How do we get around this?"
I am curious. What could someone who is entering this field expect for pay?
If someone is coming in, let's say from film school, and they say, I'm going to be a director of photography. Yeah. You've kind of heard people say, they're paying their dues or they're coming up the ladder to PA, second AC, first AC, DP. So let's just pretend that they've done all that.
Okay.
They've gone through that process and then they're jumping into AC. Okay. I mean, to a DP.
Yep.
For one, if they have gone through that process, they'll kind of already understand what a DP might make them. And it'll also help inform them, this is where I sit. Like I do, as they're getting better and better at doing their own jobs, as well as working for other people, they're like, I've pulled the best from James coming over here and I've worked with Sarah and now I'm going to do my own thing. They kind of understand how much those rates are. So that's very vague on how much it might be. Your rates as a starting DP might be $400 a day, which might be less than what you were making as an AC. But you are also in a position where there's a lot more trust and you might have to prove yourself some for that. So when I started a long time ago, I started at 500. I didn't know where I sat to kind of ask some people like, is that okay? What do you charge? Is that okay? And, after a while I moved up to 800. I moved up to 1250. And that's a little bit of just kind of figuring out what does the market hold in where you are. If I lived in Los Angeles or New York or other big cities, then that rate would be more. I think about 6 years ago, or maybe 7, is when I kind of made a big jump in my rate. And I was a little scared about it. I think I went up to 1250 and I was like, that seems like an awful lot. And it can be an awful lot. It also could be a very small amount in the big picture of a production. Yeah. So you kind of have to read the room and see what's going on. But I was afraid that people wouldn't pay that. And I remember thinking, well, if they don't, I guess I'll just go back to my old rate. And people paid it. So I think I told another friend, if people pay you this amount, then you're worth that amount to them. So if you said, hey, I'm $3,000 a day or $5,000 a day, and people said, I've seen your reel, we've done like 3 projects together or whatever, sounds good, then that's what you're worth for that person, for that project. So that's probably a super vague answer, like, it could be anywhere from
No, that's good.
$5 to 10,000.
No, a range is good. I think, especially taking into account regions. I'm curious, do you have regional quotes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. If somebody asks me from Greenville, South Carolina, I have clients there, what the rate is, well, for one, I kind of understand who that client might be in that town.
Yeah.
So, if they're like, hey, we're going to do this Coca-Cola commercial, all bets are off. It doesn't matter if they're in Greenville, Tennessee. It's a small town. But if they're like, oh, we're doing a tourism thing, and we kind of negotiate to figure out what that rate might be. But if someone called from Atlanta, then I'm going to assume that they're ready for a bigger budget, and then wait to see if they say, oh.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I get calls and I tell them my rate, and then I say, and the camera package is of course on top of that, and they go, oh.
Yeah.
And so what that means is someone is out there shooting with their own camera or camera package, maybe lighting for less than what my rate is as a DP. So I look at that two different ways. Man, they could be making a lot more.
Yeah.
But maybe not. There's more to being a DP than just producing beautiful images, because you have to be able to talk with people and understand what the scope of the project is. You have to kind of see if there are politics on set. You have to be a troubleshooter, which is much like every position on set. So some people might have better skills in all those other things than dialing in the perfect exposure.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a lot too. I mean, there has to come with it a lot of trust. Like I remember, okay, yes, this is when I was a student and everything, and I mean, looking back on it, it was kind of awful, straight out of camera color. And I remember us kind of fighting for them to have those purple skin tones. It's like those bluish purple skin tones. And you had of course like even it all out so it was good. and we're just like, I don't know. Huh?
You're talking about blue.
Yes, I'm talking about blue.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm just like, but we kind of like the title of the film is Blue, and like I still remember you sitting me down and just being like, I will do whatever you want, but
however,
I would not suggest this if I didn't think that it would make it better. and I think that was when I was just like, all right, we can trust this guy. I mean, like obviously he's very good at his job, but like, I mean, the fact that you had the sensitivity to just be like, even in a teachable moment for a student who's clinging to some trash, I think, having a crew member that you can trust is a big deal, So, I mean, you're paying for so much more than just somebody who can set exposure. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, there are clients that I am a glorified camera operator. The director knows very precisely what he wants. And so I liked the scene for him. And so that's a valid skill. But as for picking lenses, I'm just tweaking what he has in store. Nothing wrong with that at all, because my job then becomes to improve on what his ideas are, which is, again, not abnormal. And then sometimes it's whatever I want. I worked for a director. We were doing a thing for the BBC, a documentary on the Everly brothers. They flew over from the UK. I got trying to get to know. It's just a 3-man. Did we have an audio person? I think we had an audio person. So it was producer, director, me, and an audio person.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot. Oh, that's a big set.
That's a lot.
Audio person? Can't you do that yourself?
Road mic on top.
Yeah, right. We did an interview first, and when we got done, he said, all right, let's get some shots of this and this and this and this. At that point, wireless video was kind of new. I mean, wireless HD video, like what we all have on set today. And so I handed him the monitor and said, do you want to watch this? And he said, no, we hired you because we like what you do. Have fun. And then just walked away. And I was like, thanks. So I shot a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, he said, oh, hey, good morning, Bryan. And he said, I looked at the footage and I was thinking, oh, crap, I'm going home. And he was like, looked great. All right, so for today, so that's the other extreme of, not micromanaging, not managing at all. So maybe you're a DP that doesn't fit with that. You need that collaboration with somebody else. Or maybe you're someone that totally is like, I don't want you to tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. You hired me, I'd like to think that being versatile is get you more jobs.
Between like commercial or music videos or TV shows, like which one's your preference?
I like commercials. There's everyone's persnickety, which can be annoying. Move this truffle, rotate it a quarter turn. Oh, now people will buy our chocolate. That stuff annoys me, but there's usually a high attention to detail, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm. We shoot for 1 day or 4 days for just 1 or 2 spots, and so that I like that kind of stuff. And kind of look to do more like that has a creative aspect to it, instead of just a documentary like, oh, let's go see what we can find. That's fun too. There's a higher stress, of course, to the commercial projects. That's something that if you're a producer or even a new director that's coming into it, man, all the information you can give is good. Of course, there's overkill, but you never know what might come in handy. Oh, we're doing this on a dock? Like, are we going to be in the water? Oh, yeah. Forgot about that. Yeah. Do you have waiters? Do we have insurance for water? Yeah. I like commercials. Narrative stuff is nice too. We've done a handful of shorts. We've done a TV show. We've done a feature. Those are nice for different reasons. We still want them to look great, but those are also fun. Yeah. Trying to think if there's jobs I don't like. Exteriors in the summer with no shade. I don't like those.
You just like throw up some silks, maybe?
Oh, I'm just thinking for me, I'm hot. I'm not worried about how it's lit. I can handle that. I'm just like, man, I'm sweating.
That sucks, especially if you're wearing a Steadicam too. That's a whole other thing. You got this huge rig on, 70-pound rig.
Yeah, you asked about producing, anticipating stuff like that. As a producer, if you're DP, for those that aren't looking at video, I'm pointing at myself, it doesn't think, oh, it's the middle of summer and I'm going to be sweating my butt off. I got into a situation when we started coming back into production during COVID, the first year, where we were filming outside, and I was overheating, and there was no solution for it. Oh. It was probably providential that where we were shooting, there was this outside gazebo that had this massive fan, and we just happened to. I was like, hey, can you get that fan and bring it over here? I would do one I was DP and also doing Steadicam. We would do one take and I'm just dripping sweat and I'm heat, exhaustion, whatever. I don't know which one of the heat things it was, but we were lucky to have that fan there to cool me off. Not saying that the producer on that job is awesome. I love them. But next time I'm going to be like, hey, are we outside? Can we just make sure we have some cold drink, something to cool me off? Yeah. Shade.
So you've talked a lot about new producers and things to be aware of. For cinematographers, I know that there are like guilds and unions and, being part of IATSE and that kind of a thing. Is that something that you've ever considered? Are you part of it? Are you in it?
I am not. I'm not in the union. I wouldn't mind it, but I've had the paperwork. I even had one job that said, hey, are you in the union? And I said, no, but I can be tomorrow. And then they went with someone else. Mm-hmm. Because I'm in Chattanooga, there are very, very few union jobs that come into town. And the ones that do, they bring their people from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So there was no benefit for me to do that. If I lived in a larger city like Atlanta or New York or Los Angeles, then I think it would be a good thing.
Like even when you're traveling to these other jobs, has it become more of a thought in your head that might be something to pursue or no?
Oh, I will probably join the union when a job I'm on requires it. I don't think being in the union increases my skill level. There are classes that they offer and there are things like that I mean, maybe I may be correct about this, but what it probably would do would give me opportunities that I might not have otherwise.
And benefits.
Yes. And also benefits. Yeah. And also $12,000 fee. Is that what it is now for director of photography?
Oh, is it? Is that your minimum?
Plus a percentage of every job that I do, whether it's union or not. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's having benefits is great. Being able to have somebody that you can call if something feels weird about the set that you're on. I've been lucky my entire career, aside from a couple of times when I was like, this feels a little sketchy. The next day I was like, oh, sorry, that was sketchy. We're not going to do that. And sketchy, like safe, just annoying.
What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting the freelance life in order to set up those benefits that you don't get when you are in the union?
Marry someone with a good job?
Find you a sugar mama or a sugar daddy.
Yeah. Be like, hey, do you have benefits? And it's like, yeah. All right. What?
I guess I'll do
All right. Yes. What? What was your name? Where'd you come from? Yeah, that's a good question. I mentioned that early in my career I was corporate, so that kind of took care of our benefits. When you're just starting off as freelance, I'm sure it can be super hard to both have health insurance and be saving for retirement, or even having, an emergency fund. Although both of those things are very important, especially as a freelancer, because you never know when you might have 5 solid weeks of great work or months of great work, and then 2 or 3 months of like barely enough to get by. Mm-hmm. I remember talking to someone we hired as an actor from Atlanta. She got a big break on a movie. It's many, many years ago. And we were talking about how much she brought in for the movie. And I said, does that make you feel good, like you're set? And she's like, oh, I saved every bit of that. I said, oh, really? She said, yeah, I took out what I needed to live, and then I put the rest in savings because I never know when the next job might be. Mm-hmm. And I was like, And I thought that's really smart. I was corporate at the time, but I still tried to do that when I went freelance, which is hard.
Yeah.
Because when you're like, oh, it's February and I've made $19. Let me put 7 of that in a savings account. Obviously, you have to eat and pay your rent or mortgage or whatever.
Yeah. One thing, it sounds crazy, but I had never met with a financial planner before. And I thought, you know what? It's time. I've got money in savings. And I even watched, it was a silly little TikTok, but it actually wasn't that silly, because it was saying like not even the banks keep their money in the bank, and I was just like, oh hey, well, like, and I'm just like, okay, I've got some savings, but I also feel like there's something that I could be doing to to figure out some life. Like I'm not married, so like I don't necessarily have like the spouse's benefits, or the spouse's like double income, or that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he said at the very, very beginning, he's just like, okay, if you feel like you're stable, that's great. One of the first things that we want to do when you feel like you're stable is like protecting what you have. And along with health insurance and stuff like that, put some thought towards possible disability insurance. Because especially as a freelancer, if something happens to you, I'd always heard of it, but I had never actually considered it. So anyway, it was just something that I was curious of.
When we're 24 or 7 or 32 or whatever, we feel much younger than we are. Especially the older we get, we still feel young sometimes. And then out of nowhere, you're like over the hill, and you're like, the heck?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I pulled my back emptying my dishwasher. I wish that was not a true story.
Oh. I had a friend who, he's a good friend of mine, is a Steadicam operator like me, and he broke his ankle walking into his house. Just rolled it on a little thing. It was just the freak little enough to where he broke it. And so, I mean, it was a couple months, and now he had to continue to work while he, was recovering. He actually went to set and shot for 2 days with a broken ankle while doing Steadicam. So anyway, the point of that was you never know when something might happen. And if you're like 27 and you're like, all right, I'm going to go be freelance, and you start squirreling away $20, $100, $200 every paycheck or whatever.
Yeah.
There's this funny little magic thing where when it's in a savings account, it feels more painful when you take it out to pay for whatever, something else.
Yeah.
But it's when, for me at least, when it's just in my checking account, or I don't even have checks, but a checking account, it's like, whatever, I'm going to spend this money. But once it's over here, it's like, oh, I can't touch that.
Yeah.
This is a cool thing. Start saving now.
Yes. Get a Roth IRA and disability insurance.
Something.
Okay, so I'm going to ask about some tools of your trade now. I would love to know what gear or gadget is a good old reliable or resource.
There's little things that I do appreciate in doing handheld work, which I do a fair amount of handheld work. The camera sits here and it's nicely balanced and everything's fine, and there's a little shoulder pad and it fits right there. But then when you tilt up and the eyepiece is in the wrong space, sometimes you have to move the camera forward, and there's on every shoulder pad there's this nice soft thing, and then there's like hard, I don't know, poison spikes or something on the beginning, on the before and after the thing. And so as soon as you go, it's like and digging into your shoulder.
Yeah.
So in the bottom of my cart, I always have a shoulder pad that Amy, my wife, made for me. I could have bought one for like, I don't know, $6,000 or $150. I don't know how much they are.
Yeah.
But I was looking at a website and Amy said, I could make that. And like the next day I had a shoulder pad.
That's amazing. That's so amazing.
It's not something that I always use, but it is something that I want to have with me. And a runner up to that is a little foam pad, a garden pad or something, so that if I'm kneeling down in wet grass or gravel or the same poison spikes somewhere, if I'm lucky, my grip or maybe the second AC will have that handy and give it to me. Sometimes it's not enough time. Sometimes it's like, whatever, I'm just going to, push through and I'll get the shot and keep on going. But but those pads, shoulder and knee, are really good.
Just to give a little bit of background, Bryan so awesomely walked me through a kind of makeshift Steadicam rig. So there's a concert up here, and they didn't have incredibly high standards. That's why they got me to run this Steadicam that I had never run before. And as anybody listening would know, like, nobody just picks up a Steadicam and like does stuff with it, and it actually looks good. So I had no idea how to balance it. Bryan was amazing and came on for like 2 hours and showed me how to balance things, like things to look for. This is like, where you spin this and, blah, 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 blah. Super helpful. And I walked around my house, followed my cat, and got to know the rig before I had to spend a lot of time in it. And I tell you, those pads, like, you really feel it after a little bit. I still have a little bit of a bruise on my hip from this, because like there's a pad in specific places, but where there's not a pad and it is like just the buckle of stuff. Oh my stars! Oh my stars and stripes! Like, okay, so like I had my camera bag, and so I was like ripping the pads out of that. I put the camera bag, I put those on the hips, and I was just like, we're golden. I feel like the sore spot is from like before when I was practicing, not from when I actually was wearing it. So that's pretty sweet.
You touched on something that is probably an interesting thing between like the Steadicam, which is like the real Steadicam, and then like I think what you had was a fly cam.
It was something. It was like
yeah. So that can still get the job done, but what you have to do is fix those kind of problems. I'm glad that it worked out good for you. I'm glad you didn't fall off the stage. That's a good thing.
Yep. I'm glad that I wasn't just physically broken by the end of it. That's also a good thing. Okay. So for the new gadgets, the ones that revolutionize how you work, what can you dig up for that?
Something that I just recently purchased will solve a little pain point for me. You see softboxes labeled as parabolic softboxes, but they're not parabolic. Years ago, I was a Steadicam operator for Belk commercial, and that was the first time I saw a breezy light, which is a true parabolic fixture and source and makes a beautiful image for photography or video. They're also like crazy expensive and difficult to put together, but they look really good. Part of the benefit of a parabolic light all of the benefit gets negated when you put diffusion over the front, because that light then it just becomes a softbox, which still can be a pretty light. Yeah. But the second part of a true parabolic light is the light source is not at the back of the softbox, but in the middle pointing back, and then it gets reflected onto the subject. There's Aperture, Nanlux, other companies are making these LED chip on board COB lights with a little Bowen's mount for the stealing stuff from the photography people. That's where you see the majority of these kind of fake parabolic things. And we were at Cinegear last week and saw a true parabolic fixture that was not $12,000. K5600 makes one too. They call it the Curve, and that works with Joker heads. They're also quite expensive because it's complicated. But the one I found would work with any of the Bowen's mount lights and offer a true parabolic source. I'm sure there's caveats. It's probably not quite as nice as the one that costs as much as a car. So that is my newest purchase to go with some of the COB lights that I have. And to go along with that, I got another light from ProLight. I think it's the 300 FS. I chose the ProLight because it's a full color light, and they're able to get a better color rendition than just a bicolor light that goes from daylight to warm to cool, because there's something missing in the middle for that. So it shows up in a day, and we'll see if it's a good purchase or if I send it back to B&H.
Ooh, interesting. So the one that you just got, have you gotten a chance to play with it yet?
I was only able to play with the light at Cinegear, and those are hard to evaluate because I'm like, hey, Amy, stand in front of this light. Oh, look, you're brighter. So we'll see how it goes when we're on set.
Yeah. I was curious if you already knew of any quirks of it. It's always interesting, and they're always great until you figure out some of the quirks.
I was going to say, I suspect that for the price that this parabolic reflector was that works with the Bowen's mount, I suspect that there'll be some parts of it that we need to treat with kid gloves. I'm not a rental house, so I don't have to worry about, anybody coming and, messing up the thing. If it gets messed up, it's me or my crew. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll last for years to come, or just this next shoot next week.
On a technical note, that parabolic reflector, does it throw light kind of similar to a beauty dish? I mean, like a beauty dish. Yeah, it's just like you have a hot spot in the center and it's quick fall off.
So for the parabolic light, there is a video that Meet the Gaffer did, that Luke did over, I think it's number 220, and it's called Lighting for Tabletop. And they go through what it looks like between a true parabolic light like the Curve from K5600, and then like a 4K Fresnel, and then diffusion on top of that, and you're able to actually see the difference between the two fixtures and between the two methods of lighting it. They all look good, but you're able to see it instead of just being like, I think this is better. The parabolic light is focusable because that fixture can move fore and aft within the parabolic frame to kind of focus the beam on the subject that you want. Traditionally, they're used for faces, and that's why I'm excited to get it. But it also can be used in product photography as well because of the way it handles shadows.
Yeah. I mean, you just like listed off somebody who like sounds like a really awesome resource for DPs. What are some other current resources that you could think of, you could like point people to?
Oh, man. I'm not good at that. I don't trust people on YouTube. You can't get an education from somebody on YouTube. You can learn some things, but you can't get experience from somebody else's experience. I mean, I've seen people give reviews on products that I've owned, and they said, oh, it's great, it's wonderful, it's everything else, and this is how you would use it. I was like, that's not my experience, and that's not how I would use it. Not that I'm, no better than them, but there's there's no barrier to entry for someone to give you advice on how to light an interview. What you can do, though, is see what kind of jobs those people are called to. So Luke Seerveld, never can say his name right. He's a super cool guy. I've had lunch with him a couple times. I hired him actually a long time ago when we were out in San Francisco. It was right before he started his Meet the Gaffer stuff. Again, I think he had a couple of episodes. But anyway, Luke is a great resource because he's a guy that's working. He's showing us examples of the stuff that he's done and then gives us reviews based on some of that stuff. I know he's not a review site, but he's someone who talks to us about it. Yeah. So YouTube is a great resource. I can't say it's not. I just think we have to be careful, especially younger filmmakers, to realize if you're looking at what a camera does and what a lens does and all this stuff, look at the imagery that it captures, or look at something else other than just that one person that does it, or that is giving it a thumbs up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely a thing. I remember, kind of being in that stage and just like devouring everything having to do with photography. And there'd be these reviews by people, and then I would see their results, and I'm like, I don't want to listen to you anymore. That's like, that's not that's why I want to know the ones. That's why I want to know the ones that you trust.
Yeah, Luke's stuff is great. There's not really that much more that I go to. I've enjoyed watching the videos from Cook, the lens company. Yeah, they give a good sense of what these other DPs are doing. They have some round tables. Maybe this is a fault, but I struggle to get any inspiration from social media with filmmaking.
No worries.
And so maybe I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. Like, you're missing out so much.
No. Like, absolutely not. Another favorite question of mine is the stories of when something went wrong. I would love to hear a story of when something went wrong and what you did to fix it or grow from it.
Oh, on this shoot for the radio heads, this is not Radiohead, this is American Aquarium. We wanted to use haze so we could get some nice light beams. If you're on the video, you can see this nice glow behind his head, and that wouldn't have been possible if we weren't able to have atmosphere in the room. Mm-hmm. And so we asked beforehand, always ask if you're going to do atmosphere. Mm-hmm. We said, hey, can we do haze in here? And they're like, yeah, we do it for concerts all the time. Okay, cool. Getting this stuff out. Hey, we're just checking. We're going to pump a bunch of haze in here. Is that okay? Like, yeah, we do it all the time. We might have even asked a third time. The fire department showed up because the alarm went off. And so, I mean, we filled that place with haze, probably more than a concert, but it looked great. Nice. So that is one where the DP...
He just pointed at himself.
Just kind of quietly walked over in the corner and thought, well, all right, guys, to the producer, I hope you guys got that figured out. And they went and talked to them. Everything was fine. But that was the third time that had happened, when we had asked multiple times.
Dang.
Is there an alarm system in here? And that's not a big snafu. You don't go to jail for setting off an alarm. Maybe there's a fine or something. They still do have Kenny. He's kind of Ken. We call him Ken, but he's still locked away because of it. But, he wasn't help much on set anyway, so worked out good. Just kidding, Ken. We love you. We love you, Ken. I think being able to understand what is the true root of the problem and what is the most important thing to get past it. We were doing a video for a youth home in Alabama, and it was a multi-day shoot. The AD looked at the weather and said, guys, we have rain coming in about an hour. And so we hightailed it out of the interior that we were doing. We ran down to the next location, which was a basketball scene, and started getting set up for that thing as soon as we could. And then it started raining. There's just a lot to move and then a lot to get organized for a shoot like we were doing. So we had to quickly pack the cameras away, pack lighting up, and we had to figure out what do we do, because the clock's still ticking. Nothing's paused except the cameras. So we had to quickly find a location, light a location, and shoot a location in now a quarter of the time that we were going to do the other one in like 4 setups. So now we had a quarter of that time. We found a spot around the back of the building. The director is a super awesome dude down in Birmingham named Taylor. He's with 6 Foot Productions, 6'5" Productions. Can't forget the 5. And he quickly came up with a little scene to satisfy what we needed for that project. Wrote some new dialogue, if I remember right, maybe not. And we shot it in one shot. We did a oneer with the Steadicam, and it looks great. And the actors, it was fine. Nobody would watch the video and go, that one feels out of place. So the reason we were able to do that is because everybody moved quickly. Everybody understood. Nobody screwed up. We just, it's the weather. We made quick decisions and stuck to them. We also had a great experienced crew, so that was not a big deal for them. It just happened.
So the question that I always wrap up with is, what question should I have asked you?
Brian, are you available on July 27 through August 14? That's what freelancers want to hear. It's always frustrating when that happens, and then they're like, "Great, can you block that off? We got one day in there. We don't know which one." Like,
Yeah. That's kind of hilarious. So I've never gotten that answer.
So one question that I thought you might ask was, what would you recommend to someone who wanted to be a DP? I kind of touched on it a little bit, and that's, don't be tempted to just jump straight into it. I had the opportunity to when my friend, now they're friends, and the client said, "Hey, do you want to DP this commercial?" I was like, yeah, because it is what I wanted to do, and it's kind of what I had been doing. But what I missed out on was, if I was able to work as a second AC or first AC and work with other DPs and watch what they did, I would have been better set up when I did make that move to be a DP. Everyone's situation is different. When I became freelance, it was at the peak or the bottom of the recession in 2008. So I kind of rode it up with everybody else. But I missed out on learning from watching other people. I had a little bit of a stroke of luck. As a Steadicam operator, I kind of was able to watch other DPs and see what they do and see what I didn't want to do. Oh, that guy didn't know what he was doing, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit to not jumping straight in.
I heard this saying once that if you put on shoes that are too big for you, before you've grown into them, you're going to trip.
Yeah.
I always kind of think about that every now and again.
Yeah. There is a benefit to taking the jobs that people offer you. And if somebody's offering you a DP position, then, absolutely you can take that and feel confident in it. I think I didn't even realize what I was missing out on until like 6 years later. And I was like, oh, I see what's going on, or didn't go on. And so I think being aware of it might be all that you need. And you just say, okay, I need to learn that stuff in another way. If you're trying to be an AC so you can learn that kind of stuff, and there's those opportunities are not there, then, move on to what is available for you.
How do people find or follow your work? Shameless plug out.
Sadly, I am not active on any social media. I do have an Instagram account that has some stuff over the past few years. It's just Fowler Films. And my website also is Fowler Films. FowlerFilms.com for the website. There's a handful of jobs there that I put on the front page that are interesting. Oh, yeah, you can buy my coffee at covertcoffee.com, and you can place orders for coffee because I'm a weird coffee person. Then I roast coffee in my basement.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on this humble show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
If you enjoyed this interview, follow us right here and on Instagram, ask us questions, and check out more episodes at thepracticalfilmmaker.com. Be well and God bless. We'll see you next time on The Practical Filmmaker.